The coronavirus delivers an October surprise like no other. Donald Trump has COVID-19. Good evening, I'm Ian Hanamansi. What does it mean for a country at war with the virus and at odds with each other? Tonight, the U.S. president taken to hospital for precautionary reasons. So how are Americans reacting?
I still think he's a much stronger, healthier person than a Joe Biden.
And with an election around the corner, what happens now?
Earlier this week, we received a real wake-up call.
Ontario gets new COVID rules. Toronto says not tough enough. And investigating a tragedy near a North Vancouver dam.
That's really serious. Like, to not have a fail-safe.
How did that happen? This is The National.
I want to thank everybody for the tremendous support. I'm going to Walter Reed Hospital. I think I'm doing very well, but we're going to make sure that things work out. The First Lady is doing very well. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. I will never forget it. Thank you.
Those words from Donald Trump recorded just before going to hospital, necessary because at a crucial moment in a deeply divided country, COVID-19 has come to the heart of U.S. power. Donald Trump's positive test raising many urgent questions about his personal health and about its impact on the impending election.
And so tonight in a special edition of The National, we will tackle these and more. What we know about the risks for a person of his age, what preparations are underway right now in case the president becomes incapacitated. Plus, Americans are heading to the polls. How are they reacting? And of course, it is impossible to ignore Trump's own attitude towards COVID-19.
But let's start with the diagnosis for a president who, beginning tonight, is expected, we're told, to spend a few days in hospital. Susan Ormiston leads our coverage.
President Trump showing symptoms of a developing illness. Since last night, he's had a fever, nasal congestion, and a cough, aides say, and he's fatigued. But on Twitter,
I think I'm doing very well.
It was an extraordinary image. Marine One carrying the president sick with COVID-19 to Walter Reed Medical Center as a precautionary measure. Earlier, his doctor had given him a shot of an experimental antibody cocktail, the highest dose allowed, as the White House scrambled to corral the damage.
As all of you know, the president and the First Lady tested positive for COVID-19. They remain in good spirits.
A mammoth job now, contact tracing a widening circle of Americans who've been close to the president this week, when he would have been at his most contagious before symptoms appeared, including at Tuesday's debate where he mocked Biden's mask.
Like him, every time you see him, he's got a mask. He could be speaking 200 feet away from it. He shows up with the biggest mask I've ever seen.
He traveled to his golf course in New Jersey just yesterday for an exclusive fundraiser with donors.
I had to be COVID-19 tested. Everyone did. Who was going to be that close to the president.
But by then, it was Trump who was likely carrying the virus. A close advisor, Hope Hicks, had already fallen ill with COVID-19, so why was Trump cleared to travel?
It was deemed safe for the president to go. He socially distanced. It was an outdoor event, and it was deemed safe by White House operations for him to attend that event.
Trump's team is recalibrating as Joe Biden resumed his campaigning in Michigan.
My wife Jill and I prayed that they'll make a quick and full recovery. This is not a matter of politics. It's a bracing reminder to all of us that we have to take this virus seriously.
And Susan is outside the White House for us tonight. Susan, what comes next for President Trump?
Well, the president is going to be at Walter Reed for the next couple of days where he can work, and should his condition worsen, he will get the full range of treatment there. Many Americans tonight are praying for their president for a safe and speedy recovery. But there are many others who believe that this president has helped create the danger he now faces with his disregard for masking up and a cavalier approach to those large political gatherings, and that now he himself may have exposed other Americans to the risk. Ian.
Susan Ormiston in Washington tonight.
He was against wearing masks and thought everything was fake news. Now I guess we got some real news now.
What else would you expect?
Maybe he can understand personally what people have been going through.
I'm just nervous he'll recover and then spin it as it's not that big of a deal.
Well, some reaction there to Trump's diagnosis in New York City, where there was a COVID crisis back in the spring. But elsewhere in the country, the president is getting a lot of support, including in Arizona, a battleground in the upcoming election. Paul Hunter is there.
In a dusty, open field on the outskirts of Phoenix, the tent is packed with Trump 2020 T-shirts, ball caps, bumper stickers, you name it. At the Trump Patriot pop-up store, the morning after Donald Trump tested positive for COVID, business is booming.
I bought a T-shirt and 2 tank tops.
Michelle Simpkins tells us Trump's gonna be just fine. He'll get past COVID, she says. Does this change your thinking about Trump in any way?
No, I'm still voting for Trump. That will not change. No, he's done so much for the public, for the people. He is not racist. He's turned the economy around. He's turned the recession around.
With the election now just a month away, the battleground state of Arizona has become a focal point. Historically Republican, for weeks, Joe Biden has held a slim but steady lead in the polls here. Today, word of Trump's illness seemed to harden the resolve of Trump supporters. Many, even today, shopping without masks, as if in solidarity, convinced Trump will see this through and that all the talk the president's failed to lead on COVID, nonsense.
The Democrats are spewing their garbage about, oh, he failed us, oh, he did. Well, excuse me. When this virus broke out, China's the one to blame. China is the one, not the president, that brought this here.
I think he'll come out of it just fine. I still think he's a much stronger, healthier person than a Joe Biden.
In nearby Scottsdale, away from the Trump merchandise, evidence Arizona is indeed no longer a lock for Republicans. There's sympathy for Trump on a certain level, but recognition, all those rallies promoting going maskless, clearly comes with a price Trump himself is now paying.
Oh, 100%. Not only did he take this risk, he encouraged his constituents to take the same risks, whether it be through his rallies or just telling them alternative ways that were unproven to cure the virus.
Say Trump critics today here and elsewhere, the hard truth is he had it coming. No one wishes ill on anyone else, but they say it's a reminder on this issue and others, it's time for someone else in the White House. Paul Hunter, CBC News, Scottsdale, Arizona.
Donald Trump is now a member of a large group in a country with among the worst COVID-19 totals in the world. As of late today, the United States was reporting well over 7 million cases and the tragic benchmark of more than 200,000 deaths. Earlier this evening, Trump was transferred here to Walter Reed Military Hospital in Washington. As we mentioned, the White House says this is where he'll spend the next few days as what they describe as a precaution. That is on the advice of Trump's physicians. The president is at higher risk than average of developing serious symptoms from the virus, and Vicadopia explains why.
As the oldest and one of the heaviest men to be sworn in as U.S. president, Donald Trump's health status has long been the source of speculation. For good reason. Golf is all the exercise he gets. He loves fast food, and the White House's doctor tried and failed to lower his cholesterol.
Incorporating an exercise routine, working on his diet and having him lose some exercise, those things will make him much healthier next year than he is now, although his health is excellent right now.
He's in his 70s, and that's a risk factor for severe disease. So I really want to see what happens to him over the course of the next 2 weeks or so, because he could potentially get very ill from this.
Statistically, a U.S. senior between 65 and 74 is 5 times more likely to be hospitalized for COVID-19 than a person in their 20s, and the risk of death is 90 times higher. The chances of hospitalization are also 3 times higher for obese people than those of average weight. A factor Britain's Prime Minister believes played a role when he became seriously ill with COVID.
When I went into ICU, when I was really ill, I was way overweight. I'm only about 5'10", at the outside, and I was too fat.
This specialist says men who carry a lot of weight around the waist are at particular risk.
They can have cardiac complications and lung complications that are at a much higher rate than those who have lower weight. So that's the major challenge there.
The president has managed to avoid other health problems associated with his age and obesity, such as diabetes and heart disease. Despite his elevated risk, most men his age do recover. Vic Adopia, CBC News, Toronto.
The White House says Trump has not transferred power to Vice President Mike Pence, but this does raise questions about what happens if Trump were to become seriously ill. The CBC's Alex Panetta is in Washington. And Alex, tell us how it does work if a president is not able to carry out his duties.
If we're speaking of the act of governing, of running the executive branch of the U.S. government, the rules are remarkably clear. They are embedded in the original U.S. Constitution and reaffirmed in a pair of amendments, the 20th and 25th. And what basically happens is the vice president takes office, and it can happen temporarily if the president is temporarily ill. It's happened several times over the last couple of generations, arguably 3 times, certainly 2 times. George W. Bush went in for surgery twice and relinquished the duties of the office to Dick Cheney on 2 occasions. And there's some debate about whether Ronald Reagan also invoked the 25th Amendment.
Alex, let me ask you a question that I totally understand is hypothetical, but if President Trump were to become gravely ill or incapacitated as the election got very close, what happens then?
Now, that's a scenario that would plunge us into uncharted territory. It's very complicated. People are already voting in this election. More than 2 million people have voted. Donald Trump's name is on the ballot. And I've spoken to historians and election law experts today who say that there's no clear precedent for this. But what they suspect would probably happen if the victor of an election was not able to carry out the duties of their office, well, what would probably happen then is you would punt the issue over to the Electoral College, members of the Electoral College who meet in December. And they would subsequently be asked by the winning party to choose the candidate selected by, for instance, the Republican National Committee. But it's not really clear how it would work out.
All right. Well, as you said, unprecedented and very much hypothetical. Alex, thank you very much.
Thank you.
There was also a reaction on this side of the border. Here's what Prime Minister Trudeau said earlier today.
When I woke up this morning, I was apprised by my team that the President and the First Lady had tested positive. Of course, my first thoughts are in support of them, and I hope for a speedy recovery. They had certainly reached out when Sophie got her diagnosis earlier in the spring.
And let's bring in Vashi Capellos, host of CBC's Power and Politics. And Vashi, tell us more about how the Prime Minister reacted.
Well, I'm told by people around him, Ian, that surprise is really genuine, which I think is common for those of us who weren't awake in the middle of the night when that diagnosis came out. Those initial comments of well wishes towards the president, which of course he had in turn given to the Prime Minister when Sophie Gregoire Trudeau was diagnosed months ago, were one thing. But very quickly, the Prime Minister actually ended up pivoting and talking about the situation in Canada and how the diagnosis was kind of emblematic of how far the virus has spread. Have a listen.
Let's not forget that yesterday, thousands of Canadians received a positive diagnosis of COVID-19. People are challenged with this every single day across our country.
And Vashi, the Prime Minister also saying the political environment in this country around the virus so different than the United States.
Yeah, this jumped out at me too, Ian, and that's because, first of all, I should preface my comments by saying the Prime Minister does not wade into anything when it comes to U.S. politics, especially the election. He just avoids the answer pretty much completely. But in this instance, he took the time to kind of say, look, things are really polarized in the United States, and we're lucky, he used the term lucky in Canada, that it's not the same, that there is all this, bipartisan work as well as right across the provinces. And he's certainly right in that respect. There is some of that polarization here. I think it's fair to say we've seen anti-mask demonstrations, but certainly not to the extent we're seeing south of the border. Ian?
All right. Vashi Capellos, the host of Power and Politics in Ottawa. Thank you. On many occasions over many months, the president has talked about COVID-19, and his message has consistently downplayed the severity of the pandemic.
By April, in theory, when it gets a little warmer, it miraculously goes away. I hope that's true. America will again and soon be open for business. Very soon. It's only a recommendation. It's voluntary. I think wearing a face mask as I greet presidents, prime ministers, dictators, kings, queens, I don't know, somehow I don't see it for myself. But we have cases because we test. Deaths are down. Young people that would heal in a day, they have the sniffles. It's a tiny fraction of death, tiny fraction. We don't want to jump up and down and start shouting that we have a problem. I don't wear masks like him. Every time you see him, he's got a mask. He could be speaking 200 feet away from it. He shows up with the biggest mask I've ever seen.
Well, now we have a sitting president with a serious infection just weeks before an election. Joining us from New York is presidential historian Timothy Naftali. And Tim, how concerning is all of this to you?
Well, I mean, first of all, it's a catastrophe. I mean, whenever a chief of state gets ill, and the first lady is also ill, I mean, that's a real attack on the body politic, literally. Because this is happening in an election, and it's an election that is so shaped by this pandemic, this delivers an even greater blow. The fact the president went to the hospital today is not a good sign. I mean, we do want the doctors to take all precautions, but there seems to be a rapid deterioration in his condition. And that sets up a series of problems. Your reporter mentioned the transfer of power. Actually, the transfer of power, while it's laid out, the rules, the protocols are laid out, they still require either the president to voluntarily want to transfer power, or in the absence of his ability or willingness to do so, the vice president has to pull together a majority of the cabinet and decide to take the power from the president. These are very ugly scenarios and unwanted scenarios. So the first thing we want is for the president to get well soon. That we'll just have to wait and see. It is a catastrophic moment, given that it is happening at a time of intense polarization when many Americans do not trust what they're hearing from the presidency. This is a time when you want public information about the health of a sitting president to be very clear and very believable.
It's always so nice to have your perspective, Tim. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ian.
Presidential historian Timothy Naftali speaking to us from New York. And later on the National, Adrian tracks the president's movements leading up to his diagnosis. Can contact tracing work for a president on the campaign trail? I'll put that to a former assistant U.S. Surgeon General. And our political panel looks at how the president's health could further complicate a rocky election. Right now, let's turn to COVID-19 here in Canada and a disturbing trend that we've watched since early September. Back then, the number of new daily cases was around the high 500s, but over the weeks, it rose almost steadily. In the past 6 days, well over 1,600 new cases a day. Today, in fact, climbing to over 2,000. One of the highest daily totals yet. In Quebec alone, more than 1,000 new cases. In Ontario, a new single-day record, 732 COVID-19 cases. And while the Premier is imposing new restrictions, especially in Ottawa and the GTA, Toronto's medical officer of health says Doug Ford didn't go far enough. Akta Gebrselassie explains.
After a surge in cases in Toronto, lunch service was shelved at this restaurant.
As the weather cooled and case numbers went up, we've seen a precipitous drop in business.
And he may have to brace for more.
What I don't want is a return to a lockdown like we saw last spring.
Toronto's top doc says it's time for action, proposing a pause on indoor dining and group gym classes temporarily.
This is strong medicine, and I know that it will be bitter for the businesses directly impacted. But now the resurgence is here, and our doctor has issued a prescription that we must follow.
Well, not exactly. It seems it's up to the province, and the Premier may have heard the alarm.
This week, we received a real wake-up call.
But today, he didn't follow the city's recommendations, calling instead for indoor exercise classes to be capped at 10 people and indoor dining limits for hotspots. This infectious disease expert was expecting to hear more.
They don't take into account the size of the venue, for example, and what kinds of ventilation are within the venue. We really need to be more specific and targeting the areas that have shown us to be the highest risk.
With several safety measures in place, these gym goers don't believe that risk is here.
I haven't seen any cases in this gym.
The owner feels his industry is being unfairly targeted, but he's prepared to reduce class sizes again.
We followed all measures. Please, please, please just make sure that this doesn't devastate the industry as a whole.
He's hoping he won't be forced to shut the doors. John Sinopoli says he may have to do that at his restaurant if indoor dining is put on pause. Magda Gebrselassie, CBC News, Toronto.
The federal government is easing some border restrictions to allow some family members of Canadians to enter the country.
These measures will include people in an exclusive, long-term relationship and their dependent children, as well as non-dependent children, grandchildren, siblings, and grandparents.
The new measures will take effect next Thursday. One of Canada's largest oil producers, Calgary's Suncor Energy, said it will cut its staff by up to 15% over the next year and a half.
We implore the federal government to work with us to help get this industry back on its feet.
Jason Kenney says Alberta is facing the largest economic crisis since the Great Depression. As of late last year, Suncor Energy employed 13,000 people.
It's really heartbreaking and disappointing when they say that they're closing.
The Hudson's Bay Company will close its landmark store in downtown Winnipeg, the retailer blaming a shift in consumer behavior. The building opened nearly 100 years ago. The location closes in February of next year. Right after this, Adrian has much more on our top story. The President of the United States in hospital with the coronavirus.
Indeed, we have much more special coverage on this unprecedented night.
I'm going to Walter Reed Hospital. I think I'm doing very well.
Up next, an in-depth look at the days and the hours before the president's positive test. Plus, the meaning of this moment and what the next 32 days before voting day could look like now. Our U.S. political panel is standing by. We're back in 2 minutes. So what happened when? Who knew what when? These questions, always important, are now especially crucial. COVID-19 can be highly contagious in the few days before symptoms appear. So we're going to look at a crucial time frame starting Wednesday when the president was in contact with hundreds of people. On Wednesday, September 30th, President Trump seemed more than fine. Here he is at 2:30 p.m.
We're going to Minnesota. I thought the debate last night was great. We've gotten tremendous reviews on it.
Minnesota matters to the president. He lost the state in 2016, but wants to flip it this year. He arrived early at 5:15 Eastern, made time for a private fundraiser before heading to a rally at 9. COVID wasn't talked about much there, except for suggestions the economy would soon soar.
And now we're opening it up, and we're doing it at a level like nobody's ever seen before. And it's a great thing, and we're going to be back in business very soon.
The virus wasn't just in the speech, it was in the air. The New York Times reports that it was at that rally that Trump advisor Hope Hicks started feeling ill. By the time the Trump team boarded Air Force One Wednesday night, Hicks was sick enough to be quarantined on the plane. So Wednesday, almost done, and look at Trump's potential contact list. Beyond the private donors, the public, the Secret Service, and military, hundreds of people, it's his inner circle, including Jared Kushner, Ivanka Trump, senior advisor Stephen Miller, and at that point, the already symptomatic Hope Hicks. When they landed at Andrews Air Force Base at 12:10 a.m. Thursday, October 1st, Hicks deplaned through the back staircase, was tested not long after. The president was about to have a busy day.
As president,
Thursday morning, he recorded remarks for an annual Catholic charity dinner.
The end of the pandemic is in sight, and next year will be one of the greatest years in the history of our country.
At 1:14 p.m. Thursday, Trump heads to his Bedminster, New Jersey golf club for a fundraiser with hundreds of supporters. Some aides scrapped plans to join him at the last minute after learning Hicks had tested positive. We now know the White House made the call for the president and other aides to carry on.
It was deemed safe for the president to go. He socially distanced. It was an outdoor event and it was deemed safe.
But those in attendance say there was at least one indoor event in which 19 people sat with him for roughly 45 minutes. He didn't wear a mask. Attendees were tested for COVID before the meeting. They're being tested again. There's some reporting he was raspy-voiced and tired in New Jersey. This is where symptoms may have first appeared. The White House, by the way, did not publicly disclose the positive test of Hope Hicks, nor did it inform Joe Biden's team. News only emerged after 8 when a Bloomberg journalist broke that story. The president then appeared on Fox News at 9:49 p.m.
She did test positive. I just heard about this. She tested positive.
We now know he hadn't just learned about it. He'd known for the bulk of the day. At 12:54 a.m., Friday, October 2nd, the president tweeted he and the First Lady had tested positive. And so the end of a long night in the longest and strangest of years.
So what we don't yet know is whether President Trump will ultimately end up with a mild case of COVID-19 and emerge okay, or if he will struggle with a more serious case. And the implications could be very different depending on how he fares. So joining us to discuss this from Washington are David Frum, senior editor at The Atlantic, and Neera Tanden, former Obama staffer and current president of the Center for American Progress. So let's talk implications. Given either scenario for the election, where Americans are already voting, David, let's start with you.
I don't think the election implications are all that big. Look, we've seen the economy plunge from the best American economy since the late 1990s to the worst American economy since the Great Depression. And in that time, the lines of support for the president and his opponents have not really budged. The majority of Americans have been opposed to the president every single day of his presidency. Through his presidency, about 44% of Americans, sometimes as high as 45%, have supported him. His catastrophic debate performance, I doubt, moved things very much. I don't think this latest diagnosis will move things very much.
And what about you, Neera?
I disagree a little with David in that, while the polls have been relatively stable, there have been movements in the polls, and the movements in the polls correspond with how much coronavirus is in the news. So we saw over the summer with the second surge, the surge in the red states, Texas, Florida, the virus really captured the news, and it affected Donald Trump's ratings. The polls widened a bit. And in this race, 1 or 2 points makes a big difference. And I think in this case, we have Donald Trump. His own experience of testing positive is an illustration of his administration's failure to contain the virus. And I think for independent voters who are already concerned about the virus, it just makes the virus and his failings top of mind.
So you, Neera, actually had COVID this summer, rather, and I'm wondering what your thoughts are now realizing that he has it.
Well, every case is obviously different, but I would say that how you feel at the beginning of the onset of symptoms can be very different from the middle or end. So, and that is relatively common. People experience their worst symptoms usually between day 5 and 10 or 14, so in your second week. I felt, sick, but not incredibly sick in my first few days, and then I was completely wiped out in my second week of the virus. So how the president feels now is not necessarily how he will feel in the days to come. People deteriorate very quickly. And then they, obviously, we all hope that the president recovers as soon as possible. But I think the days ahead could be incredibly important.
So, David, we know there are protocols. We've been talking about this evening for managing power at this point. But, protocols and reality are different things. What are you concerned about right now?
Look, this White House is a chaos. It's always been a chaos. It's never been properly run. The one chief of staff who tried to make Donald Trump do some work sometimes, John Kelly, was fired for trying to make Donald Trump do some work sometimes. This is a dangerous world full of prowling predators. And the United States is not as powerful as it used to be. And the United States, India and China are facing off against one another. It's a world of dangers, and they sense that the United States has no government. It's had, for 4 years, or nearly so, the laziest president in American history. Now that laziest president in American history is also depleted. And one other thing we know about Donald Trump is he does not accept the handover of power. The last time the United States president had a serious health crisis was when Ronald Reagan was assassinated, or nearly assassinated, in 1981. And he was in the hospital for a while. His administration drew up the paperwork to hand over power to George H.W. Bush, the vice president. It turned out not to be necessary because Reagan made a miraculously fast recovery. But Reagan cooperated, H.W. Bush cooperated. Nothing like that is going to happen in the Trump White House. President Trump is jealous, fearful, and vindictive. He's not going to let Mike Pence stand in, and that means there's no president.
All right. Okay, listen, information and questions obviously will evolve. We will obviously stay on it, and I know we will hear from both of you again. Neera Tanden, David Frum, thank you.
Thank you.
So stay right there, please. We will have more on this fast-developing story still ahead.
Next on The National, a former Assistant U.S. Surgeon General on taking care of the president, plus stories developing across Canada tonight.
Metro Vancouver's got a lot of answering to do.
A man is dead after a wall of water crashed into the Capilano River. What happened? And
I feel like there's a ticking bomb that is ongoing within the party.
on the eve of their leadership vote, we have an exclusive story about a rift inside the Green Party. We're back right after this. Well, we're looking at a live shot of the White House tonight, the seat of executive power in the United States. But on this evening, the U.S. president is elsewhere in the Capitol, being treated for COVID-19 at the Walter Reed Army Medical Center. We want to get a better sense of what could lie ahead for him. Dr. Ali S. Khan joins us now from Omaha, Nebraska, former Assistant U.S. Surgeon General and currently a Dean at the College of Public Health at the University of Nebraska Medical Center. Dr. Khan, of course, we're not going to ask you to diagnose the president from afar, but based on your expertise, I want you to reflect on this. Yesterday, the president tested positive, and then in quick succession, he shows symptoms. He's now in hospital. Does the speed with which this is moving concern you?
Potentially, but again, we don't have all the by the way, good evening. Thank you for the opportunity. Potentially, but let's be honest, we don't really have all the facts. Some of the additional data suggests that the president actually was sick before he even took the test. So yes, correct. If you're most people, if you're testing them every day, you would find them to be positive probably 2 days before they have symptoms. But he may well have had symptoms by the time he was tested this time.
What about the notion of moving the president to Walter Reed to be in hospital as opposed to watchful waiting in the White House? Does that in and of itself raise alarms?
Not at all, and it's a very prudent decision to make sure that the president is being watched by some of the best clinicians in the United States at the current time.
We know the president's age, 74 years old. He is considered technically at least to be obese, that from his most recent White House physical. So those two things are known to make COVID symptoms worse, but on the other hand, not a smoker, not a drinker. How would you assess his risk factors?
And he's also a man, and men tend to do worse than women with this disease. So he actually has the worst risk factor, number one, which is age. So 80% of the deaths that we've seen in the United States are people greater than 65 years of age. So his risk, his absolute risk, hopefully he will do well. We're all praying for him and the First Lady to do very well. So his absolute risk is probably 50 to 100 times more than somebody else given his risk factor, given his risk factors, or his relative risk is higher, but his absolute risk still is very low. Remember, in the United States, we are dropping a number of people who die down to about 1%.
And we have about 30 seconds left, but you know, we heard somebody say a little earlier, a political analyst, her experience was she felt a lot sicker in the second week than she did in the first week when she had COVID. Would we expect to see that kind of pattern for the president as well?
That's a typical pattern, and that's not the pattern we want to see. So we would like to see people sort of resolve their viral infection in the first week and not go on into the second week when they may well have this aberrant immune response that causes the cytokine storm and a more severe illness. So we hope that the president will resolve this very quickly.
I really appreciate your perspective tonight. Dr. Eileen Echequan joining us from Omaha, Nebraska. Next on The National, eyewitness accounts of the deadly moment a huge dam accidentally released.
And then all of a sudden, we could hear this roar coming at us. There's this wall of water coming towards us.
A man is dead, another person still missing. The investigation into what happened next.
We knocked on the door. Said police, waited, I don't know, 10, 15 seconds. Okay. Knocked again.
Police recalling the moments in March before entering the Louisville apartment of Breonna Taylor, who was shot and died shortly afterwards. The recording is part of hours of audio testimony released today. The push for that rare move from those angry over the decision not to charge any of the officers for Taylor's death. Harvey Weinstein facing 6 new sexual assault charges in Los Angeles. They involve the alleged rape of 2 women more than a decade ago. Weinstein now facing a total of 11 sexual assault charges in Los Angeles County involving 5 women. He is currently serving a 23-year prison sentence in New York for rape and sexual assault. The family of Joyce Echequan is hitting back at a system they say killed her. The Indigenous woman was subjected to insults from staff as she lay dying in a Quebec hospital. Today, her family announced a series of legal actions. Allison Northcott has the details.
Joyce Echequan's partner doesn't want her death to be in vain. I'm here today to seek justice, says Carole Dubé, for his wife and for her 7 children.
Je suis convaincu que ma conjointe est décédée parce que le racisme systémique a contaminé l'hôpital de Joliette.
Echequan died shortly after live streaming this video capturing hospital staff hurling racist insults at her. A nurse and an orderly have been fired, and there are investigations by the coroner and the health authority, but her family is demanding more.
I'm deeply concerned by the events that occurred last Monday.
Their lawyer says they'll file a lawsuit against the hospital, a complaint with Quebec's Human Rights Commission and with police.
They are the reflection of the systemic racist problem experiences by First Nations every day, or I should say every second of their life.
The Vien report last year found Indigenous people face systemic discrimination when accessing public services in Quebec. Now, the demands for concrete action are growing.
I don't know what else it could possibly take for there to be actual change, besides someone live streaming from their deathbed a cry for help.
The chief of the Assembly of First Nations of Quebec-Labrador was supposed to meet with the premier today, but the chief called it off.
I didn't have what I considered a minimum condition to be there this morning.
He wanted the Atikamekw chiefs, including those from Echequan's community, at the table too.
C'est pas en annulant des rencontres.
Premier François Legault said canceling meetings won't get them anywhere, but he and Picard both say they are still open to talks. The family is also calling for a public inquiry into the hospital to look at complaints from other members of the Atikamekw community about how they were treated. Allison Northcott, CBC News, Joliette, Quebec.
Here in British Columbia, search is underway for a man believed to have been swept away in a river after a sudden release of water from a dam in North Vancouver. Another man was killed. Officials are calling this an accident. Greg Rasmussen has the story.
It's not supposed to look like this. Water gushing out of a dam above the Capilano River.
We all heard it first and then looked upstream, and there was this wall of water coming towards us.
Mike Hannafin was lucky. He watched as 5 people fishing on the edge of the river managed to scramble to safety.
It was very obvious at that point that it was not going to be safe for any of those people to be there.
The water came rushing down this canyon, and it rose so quickly that people down below on the river simply didn't have time to get out of the way. One body was recovered, and a search is underway for a possible second victim.
Our hearts go out to all of the friends and family.
Nick Nuri watched one man desperately clinging to a slippery rock as waters rose around him.
Water came up so high that he had to hang on to the rock above him not to be swept away. One wrong step and he would have been gone.
Even 4 kilometers below the dam, the change in the river was dramatic. Metro Vancouver, which operates the facility, says a crew was doing maintenance work on the dam shortly before the incident.
When a major failure like this occurs, it generally is a combination of both human error and system error or malfunction.
At the dam, friends of the missing man gathered as questions remained about the lack of a warning system in one of Vancouver's most popular recreational areas.
Ultimately, Metro Vancouver's got a lot of answering to do about what happened. I know they're starting an investigation, but that's really serious. Like, to not have a fail-safe.
The river's flow is back to normal, and people are once again fishing with a wary eye upstream. Greg Rasmussen, CBC News, North Vancouver.
When we come back, our exclusive story about what's happening inside Canada's Green Party as it gets ready to elect a new leader. They're processing ballots while dealing with an in-party rift. We're back right after this. The Green Party planning to announce its new leader tomorrow, a chance to reset and celebrate. But behind the scenes, when it comes to the party's executive director, there is conflict and concern. Ashley Burke has the details.
7-7. Not voted.
A moment of renewal this weekend has become a moment of turmoil for the Greens. While members decide the next leader, the federal council has to decide the fate of its executive director.
I feel like there's a ticking bomb that is ongoing within the party.
The Greens president resigned, a federal council member quit over the executive director and his past.
Part of my resignation was in protest against that, and I do not want to be associated with the retention of this employee.
The Greens hire Pratik Awasthi in May. He disclosed some issues from his past workplace, but not all.
During the brief time that he was involved in dealing with the alleged case of handling or mishandling a file of sexual harassment, he'd made us aware of that. The hiring committee looked into it, and we determined that it did not disqualify Mr. Awasthi as a candidate.
But Roberts admits that decision wasn't shared with council. Outgoing leader Elizabeth May looked into it herself. An internal report leaked to CBC News shows the Greens didn't verify Awasthi's version of events, and there are other complaints against him at his former job, including bullying a female staffer. But May defended him then. Now she's changed her mind.
Anything that was written in a confidential message months ago doesn't represent my current views. We've done more investigation. We have to move towards consensus.
But there's no consensus yet, only questions about the handling of the case.
It's an indication of wild incompetence. It's also an indication of a toxic history with the Green Party of Canada that predates this situation.
Awasthi offered to resign. The Greens voted to accept the offer, but months later, he's still in the job. The vote's now under dispute, and the party's new leader could inherit this mess. Ashley Burke, CBC News, Ottawa.
And CBC News will have special online coverage of the Green Party leadership results, hosted by Power and Politics host Vashi Kapelos. It starts at 5:45 p.m. Eastern on cbcnews.ca, CBC Gem, and our social media streams. First results are expected shortly after 7 p.m. Eastern. Well, here's a look at the White House tonight, and of course we are tracking that fast-developing story. In Washington, the President of the United States in hospital with COVID-19 and given an experimental antibody cocktail. What we know right after this. You're looking at the Walter Reed National Military Medical Center in Maryland. Supporters of Donald Trump are outside, the U.S. President inside after testing positive for COVID-19. He flew there by helicopter this evening, giving the thumbs up as he boarded Marine One. No comment to reporters, but he did share this recorded message on Twitter.
I want to thank everybody for the tremendous support I'm going to Walter Reed Hospital. I think I'm doing very well, but we're going to make sure that things work out.
It has been a swift series of events at a very important time in the United States. The presidential election just a month away. There are few details on Trump's condition, but here's what we do know. The White House says Trump is suffering from mild symptoms. He was injected with an experimental antibody cocktail, and he'll be staying at and working from the hospital for a few days as a precaution, we're told. He has not transferred power to the vice president. We've also just learned the president's former advisor, Kellyanne Conway, has tested positive for the virus, tweeting tonight that she is isolating with a light cough. Just think about where this story was just 24 hours ago and where it already is tonight. And we will be here through the night watching for developments. I'll be back on Sunday on The National and on Cross Country Checkup on CBC Radio. That is the latest for Friday, October the 2nd. Good night.